Hey guys, last album of the evening is Neutral Milk Hotel with their album In the Airplane Over the Sea. In the opening montage, you heard a clip from In the Airplane Over the Sea, and now you're going to hear a clip from Two Headed Boy.
Two-headed boy, put on Sunday shoes and dance.
All right, In the Airplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel comes in at number 3 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 1 in 1998, number 17 of all time. It is Neutral Milk's Hotel's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It did make Rolling Stone's list, although, did I lose it? No, it is here. 376 on Rolling Stone's list, and Neutral Milk Hotel is ranked number 42 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. This is their second and final studio album. I shouldn't say final, it's the last one. Technically, I guess they still might do another album, but this is the second one, released on February 10th, 1998. The genres include indie rock, psychedelic, folk, lo-fi, but they've also noted the wide range of influences, including Eastern European choral music, Canterbury sound, circus music, musique concrete, drone music, free jazz, and tropicalia. Influences include Pink Floyd, the Beach Boys, the Zombies, Guided by Voices, Sonic Youth, the Beatles, and the Kinks. And artists that they have influenced include the Decemberists, Arcade Fire, Franz Ferdinand, Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah, Beirut, Bright Eyes, the Lumineers, and Ockerville River. The band originated in Ruston, Louisiana in 1989 as a home recording project of the singer-guitarist Jeff Mangum. Initially called the group Milk, and early recordings were made while Mangum was still in high school. And so along with some friends, including Robert Schneider, not the Saturday Night Live Robert Schneider, just a different one, Bill Doss and William Cullen, they took some of his songs and branded them with an imaginary label called Elephant Six, which eventually grew into a musical collective. So we've actually kind of covered a couple of musical collectives in recent weeks, but this is another one, another band that you guys might have heard of.
So, could we just do a quick check of music? So, Godspeed You, Black Emperor, right, was one.
Well, that was a band, right?
Okay.
Like this is kind of like
Belle and Sebastian, weren't they a musical collective?
No, I'm not talking about singular bands. I'm talking about a number of artists that were part of an overall group, like the Outkast. Remember, Outkast was part of like a a larger group. Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry.
So it's like other, but those are like bigger acts with like more people, probably like Polyphonic Spree. I think is another band that maybe be like that. But like this is like groups of bands that kind of are part of like a, I don't want to say cult, but it's kind of like their own little group. But Apples in Stereo is another band that was part of this, and actually Robert Schneider is a member of this. I think he might be the main guy of Apples in Stereo.
I think there's a documentary on Elephant Six. I'm gonna have to look that up. I remember seeing that.
Yep, could be. So Jeff Mangum changed the band's name when he realized there was another band out there called Milk. Again, something we've heard a lot about, bands changing names after hearing that they've named themselves after a band that already existed. And they changed their name to Neutral Milk Hotel based on the suggestion of Bill Doss, who said that the name was a non sequitur influenced by the Dada movement and had no meaning. So, apparently they don't know what the meaning is either. So Jeff Mangum then attended LSU, Louisiana State University, but dropped out and moved to Athens to form the Synthetic Flying Machine. That's another band with Doss and Hart. But he left shortly after. He became a vagabond, living in various cities, including Denver, Los Angeles, and Seattle, occasionally recording music here and there. He did have a song called Everything Is, which was released on a record label called Cher Doll Records, and this exposure led him to record more music under the Neutral Milk Hotel name. He did also perform with the Apples in Stereo for a period of time, and through that group's legal representative, Brian McPherson, heard the song Everything Is, and he then became Neutral Milk Hotel's legal rep, and he sent copies of that single and another song called Ruby Bulbs to Merge Records, and based on the strength of those songs, Merge Records agreed to work with Jeff Mangum. He then moved to Denver and recorded the Neutral Milk Hotel's debut album called On Avery Island. And this was released in 1996. Schneider produced the record, and it sold around 5,000 copies, which Merge Records considered a success. So small success there. Did receive some favorable reviews, and so they toured off of that record. Mangum then added a couple of members to actually be the touring band, because basically that album was mainly him. So he added a bassist by the name of Julian Koster, who he knew from his days in Ruston, Louisiana, and who was also living in New York. And Koster, apparently, this is a weird story, but apparently he received a letter from a drummer from Chicago by the name of Jeremy Barnes, who indicated in the letter that his life was not going in the direction it was supposed to, and the message of that letter resonated with both Koster and Mangum, and they traveled to Chicago to meet up with him, auditioned him for the band, and persuaded him to drop out of DePaul University to join the band. So you've got your drummer there. And then Mangum traveled to New York to live with Koster, and on the way there, on a stop in Austin, Texas, he met a former musician from Ruston by the name of Scott Spillane, who was working at a pizza shop. Apparently, Jeff Mangum helped him make pizzas during a late-night rush and convinced him to join the band. So you've got your fourth member there. They went to New York City and lived in a house owned by Koster's grandmother. And Koster basically starts to encourage the members to play instruments outside their comfort zone. So they really start experimenting with a number of instruments, one of them being the saw, Josh. With the
I know,
the
came
musical
back.
saw is back here. 2 weeks in a row we're getting
With the vengeance.
Yes, the musical saw, the bow saw. They they moved to Athens. And by the spring of 1997, Jeff Mangum had written and demoed a number of other tracks for what would become their second album. And then they went to Denver to record in the Aeroplane Over the Sea, again with producer Robert Schneider. And so they used an interesting technique. So this is another lo-fi recording here. The technique Robert Schneider used was involved heavy compression. He basically took something called a preamplifier and placed it right up to the guitar and fed the sound through a mixing console and maximized the sound on a cassette tape. And basically, this was the process that he used for almost all the instruments on the album. So that's why you're getting a very unique kind of sound with the instruments. Mangum really wanted the album to sound distorted, and so that was intentional. Several horn parts here were composed either by Schneider or Spillane, and there's little concrete information as to the meaning behind the lyrics. There's lots of speculation, although we're pretty certain that there was a major influence was Anne Frank and the Diary of Anne Frank in particular. So that was incorporated, peppered. There's different lyrical elements of that peppered throughout, particularly in songs like Holland 1945 and Ghost. And so you've got that there. So this is the album. Initially, it was not reviewed terribly favorable. I think it was fine, but over time, this is one of those albums that got a lot of high praise and kind of a cult status. Mainly because really after this record they did tour behind it, but Mangum essentially kind of went into seclusion. He's kind of like a Salinger-like character here, where he's and people aren't really sure exactly what happened. There's lots of speculations as to, maybe he was exhausted from touring, he was tired of trying to explain his lyrics to others, and how people viewed his music and the heightened expectations for another follow-up. He kind of just quietly disbanded. He just stopped talking to members of the band, so even they didn't know what was going on, because he kind of just holed up and didn't really address it much. And eventually those members went on to do other things. Mangum did a solo album in 2001, was a touring member of a band called Circulatory System, but basically was kind of out of commission for the most part. And this also, because of the rise of the internet around this time, you got a lot of people chatting about what's going on, the mysterious nature of Jeff Mangum. Where is he? There was people who were actually following him. Journalists were trying to track him down to figure out what was going on. One journalist, Kevin Griffiths, dedicated a cover story to trying to track down Mangum. And the search ended when Mangum sent him an email that read, quote, "I am not an idea. I am a person who obviously wants to be left alone." And so he
God bless him for that.
Yeah.
Like, what an obnoxious fucking thing to do when you're trying to,
He's trying to, yep. So he stays away for several years, but he did resurface in 2008, did a few solo shows, and then embarked on a full solo tour in 2011 and 2012. And then on April 29th, 2013, an official reunion tour was announced for Neutral Milk Hotel, and they did tour behind that with that name for a couple of years into 2015. I saw a couple of those shows, actually. One of them was at Bonnaroo, and I think one of them was in D.C., if I'm not mistaken. They did release a box set in 2023 entitled The Collective Works of Neutral Milk Hotel, which includes every recording by the band. I don't know if you really need to buy box set these days with Spotify, but it is out there if you were so inclined. And so this is an album that certainly, didn't get a whole lot of buzz back in 1998, but it certainly has over the years, as you can tell by all of these high rankings that it has. And let's see, whose turn is it? Anybody want to start? Who wants to start on this?
Josh's turn to start.
Josh's turn? Okay, thanks. I wasn't paying attention to that. So, Josh, what do you think of In the Airplane Over the Sea?
So first of all, I was right. There's a documentary called The Elephant Six Recording Company that came out in 2022. So that is added to the Combing the Stacks Letterbox list. You can view it on Canopy for free through your library if you know of that service. Just FYI. Yeah, Neutral Milk Hotel is one of those bands where when I think of like Paste Magazine, I think of like Neutral Milk Hotel. They're like the indie rock band of like
Pitchfork.
the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, definitely Pitchfork. I think though, for sure. Yep.
They're like incredibly influential. They're always like name checked when you think. A lot of the bands I liked in the 2000s, like they would name check, especially like the Decemberists, which are clearly like the next generation of Neutral Milk Hotel. But so that being said, like I think I've listened to this album at some point, but I was coming to it pretty fresh, and I liked it. It's hard for me not to like it because I hear so many bands that I like coming from this music, but this band, I could see how this band could rub some people the wrong way. They throw every, Matt, you said that they were trying instruments that they weren't familiar with. Well, they threw everything in the kitchen sink on this album in terms of instruments. I'm surprised there was an electric jug on this album, honestly, because I was really hoping
I forgot about that one.
The saw and the bagpipes. I thought there'd be electric jug in here, but not that I heard, at least. It's hard. It was hard for me not to be won over by this album. I thought at times it was a little too twee for my liking. Like it really kind of toes that line from being too much and like kind of too gimmicky in some ways with all the different horns and seemingly like, I don't know, organs or harmonium or whatever the fuck they're playing. Like
white noise is listed as an instrument that somebody is playing, as well as the Wandering Genie and the euphonium.
I saw the Wandering Genie. I was like, what is the Wandering Genie?
Looks like it's just an electric organ, but it's maybe a specific kind. But
when you said Carnival Sounds, it really does kind of like almost get there for me on that front, but it never got too annoying for me. I thought that there was also multiple references to semen, which I thought was strange. But whatever. We're a sex positive podcast. Getting back to the music, I did really like the quality of the music overall. I do recognize kind of the lo-fi feel to it, but I thought it was really, again, felt really organic and natural to this type of sound that they're trying to do. I really liked kind of the ability for them to weave different, to go from like rock songs, kind of in the same way that Sparkle Horse does, like, go from like straight up like rock songs and like King of Carrot Flowers to more kind of like laments or ballads like In the Airplane Over the Sea or Holland 1945. There's kind of a retro feel to this album that I appreciate, not just with the variety of instruments, but there's also kind of like a 50s rock feel at times, like when those white guys all dressed up the same and like sang in front of a like Back to the Future, Enchantment Under the Sea type of
like
rock.
Barbershop quartets.
Yeah,
is that what
that's
okay.
I don't know. It's all that music we didn't cover on the show, so I can't like say I'm knowledgeable about it. There's also kind of on a song like The Fool, there's a real like kind of like steady marching quality sound to it, steady beat, but then also like it makes you want to like march in the streets. I don't know, like there's something structured that way that is really effective. They also throw in a lot of horns in that. There's a slight like mariachi sound at times too with the way they play the guitars, which I thought was interesting. And I just ultimately like the variety of everything going on here. I never got bored. Again, like this was another album that like kind of grew on me. I kind of, it's unfair of me to say, because I also felt like I half knew this album, either because I listened to it before or just because of all the bands that came after it, but it felt familiar in a way, but in a welcome way. And I can see the influence, listening to it of things to come down the road. And so ultimately I liked it. It's a thumbs up for me. I wasn't like, oh my God, this is the greatest album ever or the greatest indie rock album ever. But I recognize its influence and I enjoyed listening to it. So thumbs up.
Yeah, it's interesting. We do Neutral Milk Hotel and Jeff Mangum on the same episode we did Lauryn Hill, right? Because there's some, and even if you go with Manu Chao and Sparkle Horse, the other two albums we covered this week, they're kind of that like twist, artistic struggle, right? Is like a running theme through all four of them. So here's what I'm going to suggest. If you are listening on YouTube right now, because I know Neutral Milk Hotel's fan base, I want you to stop and move it ahead 8 minutes, because Matt's going to give you what you want, like in 8 minutes. And Josh gave you a fair thing right there. So I'm just going to warn you, like, go ahead, 8 minutes ahead. Okay. I hate this album. I've always hated this album. I would listen to it again with a new, fresh start. If the Velvet Underground, the line about them was like, only like 2,500 people bought the album, but like 2,000 of them started a band. I feel like in a bizarro universe, it's the same thing with Neutral Milk Hotel, but so many of them started bands I hate. Because this is like kind of the genesis of so many sounds that come in the next 20 years. You're right, Josh. It's 1,000% influential. But it's influential to like the Lumineers and the Decemberists and Arcade Fire. And like if John wrote a list of like bands I really don't like listening to, right? Like it's like the genesis of them is here. But instead of just saying that, let me kind of like explain what it is I don't like about this album. Number one, I hate the production of this album, like the compressed, like just it's lo-fi, but in a way that is overtly distracting to the point of like almost being a gimmick to me, and feels like it was like a science experiment type gimmick.
Like
that's
trying to
fine.
feel old timey too at times, I think.
Yeah, I think it was part of like what the theme that he famously didn't go into what it was, but I mean you look at the art, right, and stuff like that. It's clearly there's clearly like like an element of the historical or the literary, right, or the existential, right, that's here with that aesthetic, right? That's fine. I don't begrudge somebody for it. It's just not an appealing sound at all for me, right? It's the compression just runs into anything that I would draw out of it that I like. That the compression sound of it just. I talked before about like how Sparkle Horse, right? And I'll go back to that because we covered them this week. Sparkle Horse was like lo-fi, and at times I know Matt mentioned that the lo-fi of the singing was a barrier for him, and I get it. I feel like this whole album, production-wise, is a barrier for me. It's distracting and it feels gimmicky to me. That's like number one. Number two, there's so much going on this album that it's like Dada is perfect because it's both everything and nothing at the same time. And so because there's so much, like I can't appreciate anything. And once again, it just comes off like gimmicky, like as if you put together like a combination marching band and studio performance that just, you're just like, let's throw this in, and then let's throw this in, and then let's throw, it's kind of like what they talked about, like how like Brian Wilson, like if he didn't have like people around him, right? Like he just want to keep throwing sounds, famously made fun of in Dewey Cox, right? Where he's like bringing in like braying goats and like stuff like that. And it has a little bit of a feeling of that on this, where I'm like, all right, there's so many sounds here. And I know for some people it's like, that's the genius. It's like, I get it, but there's also sometimes it's just there, and it isn't like so much genius as it's just all the things. And so I don't really lock into anything because they're third. This album has a lot of like I went to college like vibes to it, like both in it as well as like the people I know who are around this album. That's fine. That's a tough lane for me. A lot of times, as one of my friends, God bless him, I hope he's listening, told me one time, he told me he was a fan of literate rock, and I almost like belched and vomited like on him. But like that's kind of what this is, right? It's like literate rock, right? But it's not literate like, let me take out my journal and write about basic tropes. It's sort of like vaguely historical. Like it's got a lot of like, I watched a documentary over the weekend feel to it, and just that is also something that is not appealing to me. And finally, like Jeff Mangum's voice, and especially that like I'm gonna scream until like my throat cracks in half level of like fall into the sea. Like I just can't do it. I just can't. It just, with all the rest of the stuff going on, and I can get why that would be like earnest for folks, but it is a huge barrier for me. And like every song, I feel like I'm waiting for him to like rip his throat out in the song. Those are my barriers. I think just altogether, like I've probably given this album more chances than almost any other album I can think of, because so many people I know love this. I'd like to say like the Matt thing where it's like, I'd like to like this album, but I don't think I do, because I think what it influenced, if we go off of like what rock became, like a large part of like what rock and popular music became, like, you know, not just because I got older, but it started to like lean a little bit more into this lane in terms of what like indie rock was. And it kind of moved away from like, I think themes or connective tissue. Like a good example is like the Smiths and Morrissey, right? Like have a little bit of like I went to college like to them as well. But I guess just the nostalgia and the sounds are still rooted in these groovy bass lines, and there's a simplicity to what they do along with that can draw me in, right? Like this is just like a lot of things in music that just don't connect with me. So I'm in the minority amongst even my own friends. I'm going to be in the minority on this podcast as well. Matt and I have had very many conversations about this album, so I know how he feels about this album, and he will do it justice along the way, but it is just not for me. And so I for folks that may think that the sonic palette of how they process music is similar to mine, I urge you to listen to it and see if you can get more out of it than me. But for me personally, it just checks a lot of the things that are barriers for me. So a non-recommend for my personal taste.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense if it's the seed that like sprung the indie rock tree of none of the things you like about indie rock. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. Like I said, it's like, it's the reverse Velvet Underground.
Yeah, right.
You know, we joked, it said like the Stooges, Velvet Underground, and Sonic Youth, right? Like 3 groups, and the Beatles, right? Yeah. 4 groups that kind of are like, and then they did this, right? Luckily for me, like, I like all of them a whole lot. So like what they wrote is there. I feel like this is the first time where there's one of those like highly influential where I'm like, oh boy, highly influential to like a lot of the stuff I don't like. So
yeah.
Well, 7 minutes, John. It was close to 8 there. This was interesting for me to read a little bit more about and think about like the lore of this album, right? Because there are all these records out there that just have this kind of like, there's this story behind them, there's this like there's this quality that makes it larger than life, and this
self-importance too.
And it's just like that there's a mystery behind it, and sometimes that's kind of intentional, or sometimes that's just kind of the nature of the band itself, or a particular member of the band. In this case with Jeff Mangum, who, kind of, because if you're not out there, right, it feeds like, and Lauryn Hill's a little bit like, I mean, she was certainly more out in the open, but she kind of like, nope, I'm done, right, and she kind of goes.
That's why I said it's funny we covered them both in the same episode.
Yeah. And I also found it interesting that part when I was mentioning about, when the internet came about, because what's really happened here is people just started like speculating what's going on. You've got these chat rooms and people really kind of blowing this up in this kind of like underground, this new format of communication. And, and then the album just festers, like it just gets bigger and bigger, and you hear about it here and there. I didn't hear about this band until probably the early 2000s, maybe 2001 or so, when a buddy put King of Carrot Flowers Part 1 on a tape for me, a mixtape. And it wasn't until years later that I actually listened to the record itself. Actually, I don't remember. It was a couple years after that. And I loved it from the beginning. And I think first and foremost, I love the basic. It's because a lot of this, even though there are a lot of instruments and they're throwing everything out there, we've already kind of discussed many of them, but at its core, it's like Mangum on an acoustic guitar playing fairly straightforward chords, but really, to me, very catchy chord progressions. And that's, I think, first and foremost what I was attracted to. Something like in the Aeroplane Over the Sea is a great example. It's a very simple chord progression. I think I figured out how to play that on guitar within a couple of minutes. It's not complicated chords. It's like G, E minor, D. It's like very simple to play. But it's very catchy to me, right? It's just a very pretty thing. And the bridge to that, and then but it's not just that. It's like the bridge, right? The bridge to that song where he kind of really like takes it in a little bit of a different direction, and the way it flows and the way that he kind of resolves the end of that part. It's so pretty to me, like musically. And this album is full with a lot of those moments. And then you throw in really lo-fi production, really distorted, kind of sounds that you're getting here, throwing all these instruments out, and a very distinct vocal stylings of Jeff Mangum. It's certainly not for everyone, and all the things that John is saying, that you're saying, John, that are off-putting to you about this record. It doesn't surprise me whatsoever. I would think that many people would listen to this and be like, "This sounds terrible. Like, why?" It's in some ways it's weird. It's a very DIY record, but it's a DIY record that's trying to throw a lot at you at the same time with all these other instruments and compositions. Really, a song like "The Fool," Josh. It's like a very there's lots of parts there. It's like an orchestra in a way that they're conducting there. But to me, this is a great blending of the melody, of really pretty melody throughout, whether it's something like In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, Two-Headed Boy, Oh Comely, Ghost, Two-Headed Boy Part 2, The King of Carrot Flowers. These are all really kind of catchy songs with the distortion, with the edge, with a non-traditional vocal styling of Mangum. And I like them throwing everything at this. I find this a very interesting listen. I think it's really creative and unique, especially at this time. Certainly more artists and we've mentioned some of them already, kind of go in this direction, and they kind of take this up and go in those directions. And many of those artists, to one degree or another, I like a lot. So this is, John and I are starting to diverge more, I guess, with the way that the branches of this kind of, sound are going to be going into, because some of those bands, particularly a band like the Decemberists, a band that I love, it's like, I just, for so many reasons. Arcade Fire to a lesser, like early Arcade Fire I like, and then I kind of fell off, and then you got bands like the Lumineers that like aspects I like of them. So it's not like I'm not sitting here saying like I love everything that came out of this. There's certain elements of this that certainly don't resonate with me, but some of them certainly do. And I just think this album just hits. It just hits so well. It's a unique listen. It's very pretty. It's ominous. It's dark sounding as well. And I don't ever really get sick of this record. but like I said, I get why many people wouldn't like it. Now, having said all that, do I think that it's maybe lauded a little bit, too highly? Right? Is this Is this the third best album of the '90s? I don't know about that, right? Yeah. And while John said they're saying like college rock or college music, I kind of get what you're saying. I think at the end of the day, I don't care as long as it's done well, right? Like it's hard for me to say there's this type of vibe that comes along with an album or an artist that in some ways is kind of reflective of the fans of that artist or that album, because I definitely think that music is not just about the music itself; it's about the communal effect of it, right? Like you
kind of ran away from those same shitheads when you think about it in many ways. He's like, oh Christ, these fans, I'm gonna kind of move away from them. So to some degree, he himself is like, these people, like they gotta touch grass, right? It's kind of what he said.
And you wonder if that would have been the same case if it wasn't for the internet. Like if people kind of did just leave him alone, right? Would they have done another album after this? You could probably make the argument that that's a distinct possibility. So on the one hand, I get that, and I get how like a certain genre or certain thing, you just think of the people that like that, and you're like, ugh,
yeah,
like because I don't associate with them.
I'd hate this album even if I didn't know who the people were who liked it.
And I'm saying, and I'm guilty of that too. There's certain things I'm like, ugh, I can't, like we covered Godsmack last week, and that's certainly one of them. Like, ugh, like I can't, like I don't connect with that at all. So I think while there's multiple things that kind of go into whether someone likes a song or an album or an artist or a genre, but I think it musically is like kind of the main thing that I'm looking for. I think first and foremost, and I think that this just hits for me. And I think I think that there's other elements, there's other types of this music that don't connect with me as much because I don't think the songwriting is as good, and I just think the songwriting is great here. Lyrically, people like, or that's one of the things too that gets really. It's like the cult status of this is, what does he really mean? Like what's the hidden meaning behind all this and like whatever. And to me, the lyrics are just interesting. I think that they're kind of, they're somewhat thought provoking, but it's not like I'm sitting here trying to figure them out. I just think, oh, that's kind of a cool turn of phrase or whatever. Right. And I just kind of let the music kind of speak for itself. But to me, like I really, there's lots of elements I like about this, but I think at the core, I think it's got some good acoustic guitar chord progressions with an interesting vocal styling that oddly enough doesn't bother me. We just talked about Sparkle Horse, and that was a vocal styling and I was like, ugh, like I wish he would let it out more. He was almost too reserved on that record, whereas Mangum's kind of letting it all out, and it doesn't bother me because I can, it just I for whatever reason I think it adds to it. So yeah, I love this album. Count me in. I'm a big thumbs up on it. Probably not as much as, there's other people like we mentioned that are greatest album of all time, that type of thing. I don't know if I'm quite there, but to me, this is an elite album. I very much like this album, and it never really gets old for me. So big thumbs up on my end.
Do you think, like John, to your point about like feeling like I went to college, that idea, do you feel like it's like a pretentiousness? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, it just isn't. Like, I'm not even judging it, I don't think. I know it sounds like I am. I think it's more, it's a lane of music, right? That I kind of compare it to, like I grew up playing soccer, right? Like or for our European South American events, football, right? And when I was playing it, it was a mix of different kids I played it with. Some were the classic American suburban kids, but I also played like a lot of like first generation kids, right? Like who were from Africa or Latin America and stuff like that. And I kind of over time, like that's who I thought of with soccer, right? Like suburban kids and like first gen immigrants, right? Who have like international stuff. And then like kind of there became this other like group of people who like didn't play sports, and they fashioned themselves as like world travelers, and they were very, very online, and I'd call them like kind of like center left, even though they thought they were further left than they were. And they kind of like became the face of soccer fans, right? In America. And it was one of these things where the whole reason for their fandom was they were constantly trying to take this thing that existed and other people did, right? Soccer, but kind of make it a larger outgrowth of like their virtue signaling and stuff like that. And in many ways, I think it's like the natural evolution of like the early 2000s Pitchfork, where they were so enlightened that they basically like called Liz Phair a whore who like, you know, she doesn't write the songs about fucking people like me. Like now she might want to fuck people who are like better looking than me. So she's a stupid bitch, you know, and they didn't realize like how they'd become, right? Like every bit as toxic as the people they thought. And there's like a lot of like judginess. And I'm not saying that there's a direct overlap with like Neutral Milk Hotel's fan base or the bands that came later, but I do think there's a lot of people who in their rock, they just like, they can't like just listen to traditional rock, right? It's got to be like 15 different things, and it's got to be an extension of them and kind of how smart they are and how learned they are, and like that's a little bit of what I'm getting at. I don't even like blame the band. I actually don't think that's kind of who they are, right? I think he's just sort of like a introverted guy who has a lot of interests. So I almost feel bad kind of saying that, because I think he himself was victimized by some of the same people, right? And like the idea of like going to this guy's house who's clearly trying to stay away from people and like, I came to find a journey and like enlighten everybody because, you know, we're on the internet talking about this album, and he's basically said to them, like, I'm not a fucking idea, I'm a person, you know, and as a person, do you get what I'm saying? That's a little bit of what, if it represents anything to me, it's a little bit of that, if that makes sense. So
what I'm hearing is we thought Y2K should have happened. That's ultimately what we're saying.
It's an interesting theory.
It's very similar to Weezer. Do you remember? Like Weezer was another one that there was like a hyper online community, and they were like, Pinkerton, this album sucks, right? Like, you know, what the hell's going on with, and it like drove him to almost insanity, right? And then he much like Jeff Mangum said, I'm going to go away from these people. Rivers Cuomo, another very smart guy, right? Who's in his own head. Like, he's just like, I'm going to fucking write nonsense songs for the rest of my life, you know, because like, fuck all of you, you know? And like, I do think that's a little bit of like what happened. And that's why I don't even like I think to some degree they themselves had like a similar reaction to what I did. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be a part of whatever this is. You know what I mean? Like, so
the artist, as the artist, once it's out there, you can't control how people.
Yeah, you can't control.
I think a difference between Mangum and Cuomo, though, is like how much of a slow burn this was, because it's not like it just happened. It just, you know, this took.
I mean, remember, Pinkerton wasn't popular for a while. It was like shit on over for years.
No, that's what I'm saying. There was an immediate reaction, a backlash right away. Yeah, when Weezer was a much bigger band, right? They were huge after the Blue album, and then the second album came out, and people got pissed. This was more like the album came out, nobody knew about it, and slowly but surely it started developing like this cult following, and then people like held on to the mystique and the mystery behind it, and that's ended up with, you know, over time. That's kind of what pushed him away. It seems like anyway, but who knows? Because he didn't really talk to anybody about it. Not even his band mates. They were like, we don't really know what Jeff is doing, so I guess we're gonna do our own thing now. But it couldn't have been that bad, because or maybe he just needed the money and he came back and, you know, did the reunion.
He probably like logged on to Usenet and was like, fuck this. Even the early internet was too much for him. The poor guy, I can only imagine what he thinks now of like the evolution in like Reddit and stuff, you know?
Oh yeah.
He's just like, I just want to make an album about Anne Frank, you know what I mean? And yeah.
Is there a Neutral Milk Hotel subreddit? I have to look.
I'm certain. Are you kidding me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.